Oh my God, I have to tell you, I saw your pussy pods a couple of months ago and I'm in love.
So they're stoneware bowls, so kind of the outside is like a rough earthenware texture, and then the inside, which is glazed white, has a vulva lying at the bottom of the pot. It's so much easier for people to talk about these sensitive issues when it's one step removed because it's on a pot. Yeah. Rather than talking about my vulva, my genitals and my sexuality, you can point to something external and sort of talk about that in a slightly more abstract way. And I think that's one of the nice things about the conversations that it enables.
Absolutely. I mean, it's such an interesting and important opportunity to be able to have a little bit of distance from whatever feels like this close, right? And especially when I'm working with women who have suffered any kind of shaming around their femininity or their sexuality, any kind of trauma around any of those topics, it can feel psychologically terrifying to even bridge the subject of all of the myriad questions that they might have. And so I love the idea of being able to have this proxy, right? Just a little bit of distance outside of oneself to say, look at this, and talk about it in the hypothetical, because it gives people so much more access to their feelings.
Yeah, I quite like the idea of being at a dinner party and finishing the bowl of crisps and a little unexpected conversation starter at the bottom.
It's a bit of like an vicarious exhibitionism. I love it.
Yes. I had someone say that they were going to serve men breakfast out of the bowl in the morning, just to ensure greater continuity for the whole experience, which I quite enjoy. So I do portrait pots as well. People send me a picture of their vulva and then I create a custom pot.
So tell me a little bit about some of the reactions that people have when they receive the bowl that they've ordered, whether it's a portrait bowl or one that is kind of pre-ordered on your site.
Yeah, that's actually probably been one of the most fulfilling parts of the experience of setting this up. So particularly when people receive a portrait, it's been so wonderful to feel like you're part of someone's, I guess, sort of self-acceptance journey, really. So I did one for a girl over Christmas, and she sent me such a heartfelt message afterwards saying that, you know, it felt so wonderful to see a part of her body that she'd, you know, always accepted, sure, but perhaps not celebrated, kind of converted into an object that was purely about beauty, but without having set beauty standards applied to it.
What would you say have been some of the fears or some of the pain points that you've heard from customers or people who are curious about what the work you do?
A lot of people are extremely positive. I think the preaching to the choir camp, who I have the privilege of speaking to a lot because they reach out and say that they enjoy what I'm doing. Obviously, being on the internet, there's been quite a lot of trolls and people who are a little less excited about the mission. But I actually have found that experience very interesting as well. And I've tried really hard with everyone that interacts with them, whether or not, particularly when it's a negative response, to try and have a conversation with them about their fear, resistance, whatever the kind of reactance is about.
What are some of the most negative or, I'm going to put a word out there, shaming comments that you might have received?
So the first one is just, what are you doing? This is not appropriate. We don't need this. The world doesn't need it. Or, even this is immature, which I think is interesting.
People say you're immature for creating these.
Yeah, or that the pots themselves are, someone said that they were like drawing dicks in the sand on the beach.
Interesting.
Which I did think was interesting. And I guess my response to that particular comment was that if we get to a place where girls feel like they can playfully draw vulva in sand, amazing. But at the moment, I'm not sure that would happen. I'm not sure if that did happen, it would be anatomically correct.
Right.
I kind of think the world is phallic enough, and if there is an opportunity to populate it with some slightly more yonic images, I will take it.
What are some of the other comments you've received?
And then the other category is about the vulva themselves. And this has been a really interesting conversation because there's a lot of people that well, I try with the pots to represent as much diversity as possible.
Yeah,
it's one of the things
that I absolutely love about following your feed on Insta, because every time I look at your page, I'm seeing a different and equally beautiful representation of vulvas. And every time I'm like, wow, yes, I hope someone sees that and says, finally, that's what my vulva looks like. I'm not alone, and it's fucking gorgeous.
I'm so pleased that comes across. That is great. Great to hear. That is exactly the mission. And I'm trying really hard to do my research, because what I don't want to do is inadvertently leave someone's vulva out.
Right.
But, you know, that's then invited some comments about people passing judgment about which are the better ones, or the ones that fit their kind of perceptions of what a vulva should look like. And those, I think, that's so purely the mission of what this is about, that, you know, those comments are actually relatively easy to handle, because it's like, oh, it's, you know, have you questioned why that's your expectation? You know, where's your source material for why, you know, that's the image that you feel most comfortable with. Yeah. But also at the other end of the spectrum, I've had people say, you know, more likely women, but people saying, I had assumed, I hadn't really thought about it, but I'd assumed that less is more when it comes to labia. But a lot of people prefer the more extravagant pots with kind of more detailing, and a few people have said that's actually changed the way that they feel about what good looks like. Not that there is a good, but that's really positive as well.
Yeah. I mean, I wonder about, you know, what you hear from women in terms of their own experience to their vulvas as it changes throughout their lifespan.
Yeah, great question. I keep trying to pitch the idea to my pregnant friends of a pre versus post.
Yes.
I think it'd be so fun. I don't even know how much the vulva changes, you know, externally as a result of birth, but you know, I would love that to be something that more people knew about, which I could help with. So far, none of them have bitten, but I've been trying to encourage them to take the before picture now, even if they change their mind later.
So if you're watching right now, this is a really great experiment, right? If you're pregnant or think you're going to become pregnant soon, do a pre and a post, and then celebrate whatever the reality is, because our bodies change as we get older, no matter what our circumstances, right? You're not going to have the same body you had at 16, at 36, at 56, at 76. And there are opportunities to celebrate that at every juncture. And so this is such a cool memorialization of how this very powerful part of a woman's body can change throughout her life.
Yeah, so true. I think it would be so wonderful to have a set celebrating birth and the majesty, I guess, of a woman's body. But also to your point about age, I think something that I would like to do more of is making sure I'm representing the entire age range with my vulva. It's even harder to acquire images of older women's vulva.
Right. How do you work with people who are in the process of confirming their own bodies, and can you help them in that journey?
I've also done a few kind of post-operative trans vulvas as well, and not that you necessarily know from looking at the finished product, but it feels important to me that that is represented, and that you might recognize yourself.
It's so subjective, right? Each person's relationship to their own body or to bodies in general is influenced by so many different things, right? The messages they've heard, whether or not they feel comfortable in their own skin, whether or not other people have shamed them or conditioned them to not even think about it, or paired together the idea of thinking about it or talking with it with being bad or dirty or sinful or something along those lines. So it really taps on these very existential crises that we have about who we are, and are we okay and good at our core.
I think it's so true, and I think there's such a the kind of fallacy of assigning moral worth to the way that you look, and whether or not it's about your weight or anything else, or the way that your vulva looks. And there's something for me which is about, it's a private area, sure, that's very, very special, and I understand people's motivations for keeping it discreet. But on the other hand, there's something quite nice about just neutralizing quite a lot about it by getting it out literally on the table. and enabling people to have a slightly less loaded discussion about it, I guess.
Yeah.